You're looking at a movement that's funded by men that literally sit at the table by the devil. Hey guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today, as you can see by the title, I'm going to be exposing a bit more about the feminist movement and what I feel like it is being used for today, and how that it is actually not beneficial to women and society as a whole, and how that this definitely has the backing of Lucifer. So if you are interested to hear more, keep listening. So it's kind of crazy to me what they've been doing lately and how they've been getting away with this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying absolutely everything about feminism, particularly when it started, is bad. I'm not saying that at all, because I do think there were some positive points to it back in the day in terms of like pay. I mean, you could say voting, but I don't really believe in the vote and politics and all that anyway. That's a whole nother discussion, which I'm not going to get into today. But so, you know, I mean, you can use that if you're somebody obviously that believes in the political system and all that stuff, fair enough. That could be seen as a positive, but like I said, yeah, not a fan of voting in the political system anyway, because we all know the same people are behind the scenes regardless. More worried about them than I am about the puppets in the front, but that's a whole other discussion which I'm not going to go into too much today. But just to make a point, I don't think everything about feminism is bad. I think there were a couple of good points in it, 100%, and I just want to make that very clear when I start this video, because sometimes when you talk about bad points of it, everyone sometimes thinks you're demonizing the whole thing and saying everything about it's bad, but what about this happened and that was positive. I'm not saying that there weren't some positives, particularly when things first started, in terms of some equal rights in terms of women. I'm not saying that, but I really want to talk about how it's been funded, what it's been funded for, and how it's actually being used in society today. And it has definitely been used by Satan today, and I want to talk a bit more about that. So one thing that I want to talk about before I get into some of the history, and again, the thing is with feminism, it has an extremely large history, and I'm not really going to go into like the massive history of it because it's extremely long. It's interesting, but it's extremely long. So this video would literally take forever. I just want to go into some overall brief points about it. I may do another video in a little bit more detail on this again, because there's so much information. I would feel like it needs to be split, because it's a very long history, into two separate videos, and there's a lot to read up on it as well. But I just kind of want to go over some of my brief points and a few things that I feel like back that up. Now, what I feel like they're doing today in terms of feminism and stuff is, I feel like 100% their aim is to break up the family. I 100% believe that the powers that be, the people at the top, some of the families, some of the names we've probably never heard of, I do believe their goal is to break up the nuclear family, is to destroy marriages, because marriages are something of God. It talks about this in the Bible. It talks about, which I want to go into a little bit more detail, about submitting to our husband. It also talks about, obviously, husbands loving their wife the way they love Christ, so, which is a very, very deep statement. So it goes on both sides. I'm just talking about the female perspective today, but obviously there is things on both sides. But, you know, it talks about marriage is a commitment in front of God, and it's something of God because we become one flesh. And I think the devil is out there. In fact, I think it's pretty obvious the devil is out there to destroy this. The devil wants to destroy anything of God and doesn't want people doing things of God. And I think this is why we kind of have this today. So I think what we've got going on now, which is really sad to see, and I had this mindset to some degree at one point as well, and I think the entertainment industry does a great way of backing this up, because we all know Hollywood's demonic and full of Satanism and child pedophilia, and I dread to think what else. It's just absolutely horrific. But what they're doing today is they're trying to make women feel empowered in the wrong way. It is not empowering to, you know, say, oh, I don't need a man, and, you know, I'm just going to do everything by myself. Like, this is what the devil has made women think is empowering today, and it is categorically wrong. They've made women think it's empowering to go out and wear literally next to nothing. Now, I'm not judging individual people and what they do, because I've had to change certain things within my wardrobe recently, and I'm not saying you've got to be covered head to toe or anything too drastic, but when you look at a lot of these music videos, taking Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion just for some examples, there's many, many more, but they're just very famous ones to take examples from. Look at a lot of their attire today. A lot of these clothes that are being pushed today are definitely of the devil, because they're trying to make women feel empowered when we go out next to nothing. What is empowerment? Because I can wear what I like, not understanding that that is not female empowerment. growing up thinking, well, I can just use men, I'm a savage. Literally, that's what the song is. But like, we can act like savages and just sleep with men and drop them, and basically saying that, and men shouldn't act like this either, by the way. I'm just talking more from the feminism point today because that's what my video is about, but it's wrong on both sides, so I just want to make that very clear. But obviously this title is about feminism, so I'm going to concentrate a little bit more on that. But I think it's so sad, and I've heard this in the youth, that young girls are growing up thinking like that we don't need men, I'm going to be independent, I don't need a man to have a family with, I'll just do my own thing, and I can go out wearing whatever I like because that shows that I'm empowered when I go out like that. And to me, that is not empowerment. That is from the devil. That is definitely deceit. That they're saying that we can walk around and drop men and sleep with men, and oh yeah, I've got a whole team of men, and I go from one to the other, and I've got backups and all this kind of stuff. And I just think it is such a demonic way to think, and like I said, sexual sin is a really, really big one within the Bible. It's a really big one within God's eyes, and it's something and again, obviously we're not perfect, we make mistakes sometimes, but the way they're spreading this message of like women can just go out there and act how they like, and you don't need to be married, and you don't need a man, and I just think it's awful. Like, you can see today, obviously the divorce rates have gone through the roof compared to what they were back in the day. And I'm not saying people were perfect back in the day, because they definitely weren't. There was deception going on there too. And I think, a lot of people feed the flesh. Like I said, sometimes a lot of the time, we need to be within the spirit, not within the flesh. Because a lot of the time with what we're doing is we're feeding our fleshly desires, not our spirit desires. And this is where the problem comes in. And what they've done with these movements a lot of the time, and I'm not saying feminism as a whole in particular is promoting that. I'm just saying in general what's being promoted to women, and to younger people on social media, like, even when you look at Rihanna's line, and I was thinking about this the other day, like Savage Fenty, the name first of all is already a clear, I mean, she's definitely part of the Illuminati and definitely satanic, but you can tell she's given her life to Satan. But by promoting this stuff and getting people to wear that all over the gram, like you're seeing a lot more on the gram today, like a lot more than probably what we were back in the day when things first started, because I remember that, because obviously I'm a little bit older now, so I can remember what it was like back then. And I just think it's so bad the way they're brainwashing younger and probably slightly older women to kind of think in this way. And I definitely believe that there are ways that we can empower ourselves as women, but this is not the way. A way to empower ourselves as women is not to do things of the devil, is not to be sexually immoral, is not to be wearing some of these crazy type things that people are wearing. And I know this can be a very unpopular opinion, but it's something that we really need to be made aware of, because they are really coming to destroy marriage. They don't want marriages, because that is of the kingdom. The devil does not want marriages of the kingdom. That is what he wants to break apart. And this is why there's so much demonic influence in terms of people's marriages. And you really got to pray over your marriage. Things aren't easy, obviously, in relationships. Things aren't easy in terms of, dealing with your flesh and your sexual desires by any means. I'm fully aware of that. But we have to understand that anything we do here is very, very temporary. Everything in our next life is everlasting. It's for eternity. So nothing we do here will ever be worth what we would suffer in the next life if we continue to sin and not repent and try and do better. And I just really want to talk a lot more about this, because I just feel like the message they're pushing to younger girls through music today, and some of the lyrics that are in this, and even the male rap lyrics as well, and the way they're treating women, and is completely wrong. I think a lot of males have been brainwashed to treat women in certain ways, and women have been brainwashed to act certain ways. And it talks a lot about gender reversal roles and how women becoming more like men and some men are becoming more like women, and it talks a lot about this in the Bible. I definitely see this going on in today's society, and I think it's a major issue. And I think they're trying their best to make sure that the nuclear family is not a thing anymore. The over-sexualization in society today with men and women is insane. Women are 100% meant to be more nurturing, and I just find what they're doing today is so bad. In terms of how they're brainwashing people through music and media and films and things like that. And even sites like, we've got a lot of the OnlyFans going on today, and people are now making it popular and cool and trendy to be doing type of pornography and doing type of pornographic things to make money. And I just think that's really crazy. And my testimony is going to be an interesting one when I put my full testimony out, because this is what I'm doing today is going to make a lot more sense of why I have a right to speak about this, because I could see how I got tricked so easily into certain things. And I'm going to speak a lot more about this in my testimony. But you can just see how they're making it so popular today. Like, look how much money you can get. And I think YouTube's played a big part in that as well, you know. And I think it's great that people are successful on YouTube. But I do think, and I'm not saying that, by the way, I'm not attacking individual people. I'm not saying that the people doing this on YouTube are doing it to promote that lifestyle or to tell people to go into that lifestyle, because that's not what they're doing. But what we have to understand is, regardless if we're out here not saying, you know, regardless if we're out here saying, well, I'm not doing it to tell people to go into that industry or to tell people to go into the sex industry or OnlyFans or stripping or whatever, you know, I'm not saying these girls are doing that, because they're quite clearly not, and they often say that. But what you have to understand is that doesn't actually matter, because when you're getting girls, and I know this because I was influenced by watching some of it, so if I dread to think how younger women were, you know, like I'm 30 years old, so I dread to think what teenage girls and girls in their young 20s, it is naturally going to brainwash and influence whether you like it or not. And you know, this is one thing that we have to understand. Although some people aren't purposely going out there to do this, and like I said, I'm not coming to attack people for putting their truth out, because that's their story or whatever, but we have to understand that this is going to influence people regardless, and that's just how it works. That's just how the brain and psychology works. It's going to influence people, and I think we have to understand that because it's become so popular today, and look at a lot of the channels that are getting views of these types of channels, it is going to be influencing younger women, and the devil is definitely a part of spreading this, and it's become bigger and bigger these days. Like, I see so many women now going into these industries to make money, and I know a lot of the reasons aren't bad a lot of the time, and I don't think people realize a lot of the time what we're getting ourselves involved into, but a lot of it is, like I said, of the devil, because it's definitely not of God. So that's just something I wanted to talk about. You know, we don't need to empower ourselves through this way. We don't need to empower ourselves through wearing certain bits of clothes. We don't need to empower ourselves by being sexually immoral and saying, well, I can just sleep with this man and chuck him because I'm so empowered. And, you know, they've really twisted it to make us think like it's great to not have feelings, you know. And don't get me wrong, like I said, you have to be careful, of course, but they've made it so like, oh, well, it's so great, like you're this boss kind of bitch, because, you know, you can have sex with a man and then not get feelings and leave away, and you don't need a man. And that's not what makes you a boss bitch. Just want to make that very clear. You know, what makes us that is looking after somebody, and it has to be the right person. That's why having a man of God is so important, because making you a boss female is you're empowered by being able to submit to a man. You're empowered by being able to look after a man who looks after you in return, because love, and I've been taught this a lot lately, love is not a feeling, it's an action. And I never ever knew that before, and I never thought about that before, but since I've come into the faith, I've really realized that, you know, when it talks about a man loving his wife the way Christ loved others, that is a very deep statement, and if a man truly does that, there is no reason why you wouldn't want to submit to somebody that would treat you like that. Trust and believe me, because the difference between being with someone worldly and someone in the faith is like night and day. It's two completely different things, and I think they make it sound like, you know, being a female, and there's nothing wrong with females going out there and working and having businesses and all that. That's not what I'm saying, because, you know, I have my own business. I think that's great, but there's also nothing wrong with wanting to be a stay-at-home mum. They're both completely fine, because I know it's difficult today, and sometimes people have to work, and if you like having a business, there's nothing wrong with that by any means. But I think they've made it seem bad to want to look after your husband. They've made it seem bad to want to get married and have that family unit, when I think that's another reason why there's so many mental health issues. There's so many children, and, you know, like I said, I'm talking about females in particular here, growing up without that male influence, and that does cause problems, and that does affect, not everybody, but that does affect how a lot of women act as they grow up. And I know that from personal experience, because I grew up in a broken family, and it 100% gave me trust issues with men, 100%. And this is what the devil will do, and then it's just a cycle. This is a pattern and a cycle. Now, I'm not saying sometimes it can always be avoided. Of course, there's some situations where you've tried your best and you think what you've met is a very godly man, and sometimes, you know, things can go wrong. But I think it's very important to really pray before you make a commitment to people. And I generally believe that no sex before marriage is an extremely good thing. You know, first of all, obviously we know there's a lot of health problems going around today because of this, and again, I'm not talking so much about viruses, I have a different opinion on that, but other things. And I also think it does cause a lot of mental health issues deep down, even if people don't always realize it. And again, obviously it's a sin, it's not of God. And I think, like I said, for me, I never wanted a child out of wedlock. And again, I'm not hating on people that have by any means. I know this isn't a very popular subject, but I do think it is important to marry before we have children, because that's where I think, again, that you have more chance, I'm not saying 100, but you have more chance of stability. And, you know, I just think it's a really important subject to touch on. And again, a lot of the subjects I touch on are not popular. I know I'm not going to always receive good comments in terms of this, but I do think it is very, very important because, you know, it gives you that stability. And I think a lot of mental health issues have come from not having stability within the family. I think it does cause a lot of problems, and it causes a breakdown in society. It does not benefit society feeding females and younger women with this type of philosophy that we don't need men and we can be sexually immoral and we can be savage and all this kind of stuff. Like, I mean, do we want our daughters to act like that? Because I know if I had a daughter, I certainly would not. So, you know, I think it's something we really do have to really discern. So after the chat, I'm going to go into a bit of history about the feminist movement. So first of all, the first worrying point about feminism, it was designed or taken over by the Rockefellers. So most of us know the Rockefellers to be that rich. I use the word elite. They're not obviously elite in terms of that, but these rich, I'm trying to think of another word, powerful type people that literally sit at the table with the devil. So they funded and part designed the feminist movement. And I want to read a quote from Nick Rockefeller. So he said, "The Family Foundation," which is a foundation that they fund, "created women's liberation for the mass media control to enslave humanity." That was his quote. So what they've done is they've funded and taken over the feminist movement. I think one, it was to tax women and men so they could obviously have more of the coin, and I'm sure they got enough of that now, so it's probably not their main aim. And I also think it was to enslave our children more, to take the children into the system and to kind of brainwash them, because if we're not looking after our children, they are. And I know to some degree it has to be done these days, I'm not debating that, but you know, I think that's one of the main reasons why they've done it as well. And it's also to, like I said, to break up the family unit and to make women think they don't need men, etc., etc. Another thing that is often spoke about as well, it's I think it's also, like I said, to increase sexual activity because of the way that they've used the feminism movement to do that with. And like I said, it's increased the rate of divorce. One thing that I'd really want people to look into is Google the Rockefeller Foundation and Women's Studies. Google that. I'll just leave that there because that says enough. Another thing that I want to talk about, because she was one of the main figures, is Gloria Steinem. She was back in the day one of the main figures in terms of feminism, not the only one, but one of the main figures back in the day. And I just want to talk a little bit more about the deception about her. So around in the 1960s, bearing this in mind, as soon as I say I say company, this organization that's going to say enough, she worked for the CIA. To me, that said enough. I didn't really need to read on after that, but I did. This was obviously to help push, so part of this feminine movement is to help push the New World Order as well, so that's something else we should bear in mind. She was also the editor at the MS magazine, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as I go along. So in the CIA, she had a friendship with another lady called Catherine Graham, and she worked for the Washington Post, so another slightly red flag there. And Gloria Steinem, in her history and as a childhood, they actually explained it like she'd always been this Marxist and grown up this, like, you know, freedom fighter for women and all this kind of stuff. That was actually really not true. It actually turned out that she came from a very dysfunctional, broken family. And there was some talk about her being in some type of fellowship, and it actually turned out that she was actually the only one in that. So there was also a lot of lies around that as well. So I think it was around 1958 that she was recruited by the CIA. And when you look at the magazine that she was the editor for, the MS magazine, that was actually funded by Warner Communications. So that's another red flag. And she also had a relationship with one of the guys who actually was one of the main guys who actually stalled the FBI investigation into the death of Martin Luther King. There is also some connection and links between the CIA and the Skull and Bone Society. Many of us may know about the Skull and Bone Society. Again, there's a lot to go into that. That would literally be a whole massive video on its own. But again, another massive red flag. So a lot of it, again, it really wasn't for the empowerment of women. I don't think anyone's going to believe that somebody that worked for the CIA was really part of this to empower women. A lot of it was lies and deception, and a lot of things that were spoke about around her were also lies and deception. So yeah, I think when we look into history, and again, like I said, I'm not going to do everything. So I just, like I said, want to make very clear that this video, there is so much into the history of feminism. And I'm not saying everything that's been a part of it has been bad. I do think there are a couple of things within it that have been a positive. But I think overall, and especially what it's been used for today, is very toxic. You know, you often hear this term toxic masculinity. I mean, there's just toxic people. You know, you hear this a lot. And I do think it is actually destroying things and causing more mental health problems than it is helping today. And I think what it's turned into in some degrees is slightly man-hating. And I'm not saying this overall. I'm not saying that everybody in the movement thinks exactly the same, because that's never true. You can never categorize a whole group of people. But a lot of what they're pushing for and what it's been used for today, I mean, you're looking at a movement that's funded by men that literally sit at the table by the devil. You're looking at a feminist movement run and funded by men. So that, to me, that is already a big flag. And the fact that it's the Rockefellers is, yeah, says enough. So I think we need to look at what it's being used for and what the agendas of it are today. And it is not good agendas. And that's why they're pushing all this type of music and type of pornography and type of, you know, social media, because they want to over sexualize people. I think that's very, very obvious today, particularly with women. They want women to have this, and by listening to a lot of these tunes and people singing along, you're speaking that into existence. You're promoting that, you know, by a lot of these lyrics. And I really realized that when I used to listen to that music, what I'm really promoting, and it does affect you psychologically, whether you like it or not. You know, music affects you. A lot of the industry is, that's why the devil uses it so heavily, because he knows it's going to affect people. You know, sometimes you listen to a tune and you're like, oh, I want to go to the club now, you know what I mean? Because that's the way it influences us. And I think so something we really have to realize, like I said, feminism has an extremely long history, and I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of everything. I don't always think that's so important in that aspect anyway, but we have to understand what the overall agenda of it is and what it's being used for, and how it is completely opposite of God. We know the devil inverts everything of God, does the opposite, wants to get people as far away from God as possible. And that's why they are destroying the setup of a marriage. That's why they're destroying gender roles in terms of, you know, what we should be doing in our relationships and stuff like that. That is being destroyed for a reason, and it's definitely not a good one. You know, and I'm not out here to like come for individual people or judge individual people by any means. I'm come here to judge the concept and the agenda of what the devil is doing. And I think it's really important that we expose this and talk up about it, because I think a lot of people are afraid to talk up about certain subjects, and I understand that, because it is not a popular subject. You know, if I wanted to be popular, these definitely wouldn't be the subjects I would be touching. But I just think it's very, very important to understand what they're promoting and why they're doing it and where these movements come from. So yeah, so I'm probably going to do a part 2 to this, because there is so much in the history that I actually want to expose it a little bit more and go into a little bit more detail. So I think I will do a part 2. So yeah, I think I'll definitely do a part 2 of this video, because I think it's really important to expose the devil and really put this stuff out there, because at least by knowing this stuff, we know what to avoid, and it sort of helps us stay more in line with God's word and God's law. But yeah, I hope that helped people. I hope that gave a bit more into an insight of why I'm not a feminist. Why I am not a massive fan of the feminist movement, and why I don't follow a lot of that stuff. Like I said, I'm not anti everything, but there's way too many red flags within it, and I can exactly see the agenda they're trying to push today, and I completely do not agree with that. And I was somebody that has always been, and I still am to some degree, very independent. Like I said, I have my own business, and I don't think there's anything wrong with some aspects of that by any means, but I used to have this thing that, oh, I don't need a man, and it's like, I don't know, I was lying to myself, and then anyway, because deep down that was not what I wanted. But, you know, and I'm not saying everyone's like that, that's just my personal experience, but I think they're getting us to aim for the wrong things. I think we need to be careful what the younger generation are listening to and getting involved in, because it changes our ideologies. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video, guys, and I'm sure it won't be the most popular reviews, but there we go. But yeah, I hope to see you in my next video.